You've got unemployed workers, 14 more General Motors factories closing, dozens of factories now idle, hundreds of thousands of unemployed auto workers. What could you build? And he says, well, you could build bullet trains. Now, bullet trains would be the Japanese trains, but of course they're obsolete now. We want maglev. We want magnetic levitation railways where you go from Los Angeles to New York in 3 hours in a rail car.
Instead, they're going to build cruddy local slow trains to nowhere with people so poor they can't even afford to get on them, instead of super trains to cities where you say, oh, I'm going to shoot down to Dallas on the hour train instead of 4 hours in a car. But they won't do it, man. They will not do it because it's a good idea.
This is what you got to fight for. In other words, I'm very encouraged to see that some of these ideas are floating around. So Michael Moore says you can build mass transit, you can build maglev, and then he says alternative energy. He wants to build windmills. Well, the windmills are crazy. Build nuclear reactors. Build 100 high-temperature
let's back that up. Let's back that up. You can't build windmills because for the amount of power they generate and their cost, there's not a way to transfer the power without power loss. For those that don't know, power lines lose power. So the substations to hold that power are too cost prohibitive from the wind centers of the country to deliver it to major megacities. Now, wind is good in a localized small town setting.
Well, it can be used for specialties when there's no other alternative. But generally speaking, you're going to put more energy into the windmill than you're ever going to get out of it. So there are some places where you need that kind of thing. But as a base load approach to an industrial economy, it's a bad joke.
It's not a primary driver. But listen, before we get out of time, and I know you want to get into solutions, Webster, but I think people need to understand what's going to happen, because clearly none of these are being implemented. And even if people don't agree with your solutions, they've got their own. Nothing but everything for Wall Street, into the black hole, everything clearly Pentagon, Northcom standing by to deliver us directly into the maw. And we've got Zolik, warns stimulus sugar high won't stem unemployment. So what's this doublespeak? Top neocon World Bank President Robert Zolik, literally an Israeli agent publicly, warns policymakers that fiscal stimulus plans are insufficient to turn around the real economy, and rising joblessness threatens to set off political unrest across the globe. And then he goes on, so why are they making statements about political unrest knowing it's going to happen when they've engineered the policies knowing it would do that?
Well, there has been a lot of political unrest. There's been a big ferment in the trade union movement in Europe. There have been various kinds of riots and things like this around the world. And that's why I'm saying the program is absolutely critical. In other words, you can get a mass movement going under these circumstances, but if the Democratic Party collapses, you've got to have an actual program to get out of the Depression. I would say that's the golden question of right now. In other words, the most precious wisdom in the world is, how do you actually get out of a depression? And I believe I know, and that's what I put into this book, Surviving the Cataclysm, which people can get from Progressive Press, and then I hope soon from you.
Yeah, folks, just Google Surviving the Cataclysm, Webster Tarpley.
Resistance, okay? A couple of other things going around. The French government, of all people, the French government has now proposed a Tobin tax, the securities transfer tax. In other words, something like a 1% sales tax on Wall Street bankers as they do their trillions of dollars.
I only support that if it's implemented by the nations, not by the very bankers themselves.
Well, it's implemented against the bankers themselves. They're the ones who pay it.
No, but you understand the UN and the bankers have been proposing a Tobin, but on our money transfers to bring in a global model.
On derivatives, on the rest of their speculation. Another example, the banks now, they have now bid the price of oil up to $67, $68. Now, remember who this is. This is Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, and they operate through the London ICE exchange. You can see it. They did it last year. They got it up to $150, $160. They're trying to do it again. So that's their thanks. You bailed them out with the TARP. Your tax money went to Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, which are now banks. But, of course, as zombie banks, the only thing they do is derivatives and proprietary
And now
trading.
they're going to jack up energy so they all make tens of billions.
They've got to drive the price of gasoline and oil up to make some of these crazy windmills look more plausible. So that's what they're doing. By the middle of last summer, you were paying $1 for every gallon of gas. $1 went to Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley alone. So if you don't like that, what you got to do is take measures to stop speculation. 100% margin requirements, position limits, and special status for speculators, which is inferior to the status of users and hedgers. Now, The other aspect of it is a political resistance. And I don't know if you've talked about Sri Lanka, but this seems to me to be very, very, very interesting. The U.S. and the British, over decades, fomented this Tamil Tiger revolt. These are terrorist butchers of the worst kind, right? Suicide bombers, female suicide bombers. They pioneered all this stuff. The question now is the Indian Ocean as the Chinese lifeline, right? The Chinese need to get oil from the Persian Gulf, oil from Sudan, raw materials from Africa. So the Indian Ocean, the Ark of Crisis, in Brzezinski's terms, is now a key place. In the middle of this, you had this terrorist army sponsored by the U.S. and the British, the Liberation Tigers, and they have now been annihilated. Their chief, this guy Prabhakaran, has been liquidated. And what you saw, a very interesting epiphany, right? The moment where you really see what's what in the world. As the Sri Lankan army closes in on these awful, awful terrorists, the British Foreign Secretary, David Miliband, and the French Foreign Minister, Bernard Kouchner, come forward and say, oh no, this is terrible, it's a humanitarian catastrophe, we've got to have a ceasefire. Ceasefire means that the Tamil Tigers escape and live to come back and kill and have more suicide bombers another day. But
that's just like using Al-Qaeda to attack the Serbs, and then they, on this airplane in Iran, they find the bomb. Iran's on record saying the U.S. is using Al-Qaeda to attack them. The White House admits under Bush and Obama they're using Sunnis to destabilize Iran, and then the news has the nerve to say that Shiite Iran is Al-Qaeda. I mean, how dumb. Don't people know that Al-Qaeda is the U.S. British government?
Well, the KLA of Kosovo that Biden has just been visiting, and the Tamil Tigers, and the...
But, I mean, that's how ridiculous it is. On record, the White House puts out press releases saying, we got 4 Sunni groups attacking Iran. They're blowing up mosques, trying to blow up airplanes, bombing things. And then they got the nerve to say on the news, look, Al-Qaeda is hitting Iran. We've got to stop Al-Qaeda. I mean, how dumb do these people think the population is?
It's specifically Jundullah, right? The Baluchistan... U.S.-backed liberation front.
Yeah.
Now, what the Sri Lankans have done is going to be imitated, and I think the Pakistanis have gotten the idea. Now, the reason that Obama wants...
I'm going to stop you again. Pakistan president goes on and says, we're with Al-Qaeda. You created Al-Qaeda. You're using the Taliban to isolate our cities. You're overthrowing us with your Al-Qaeda. And, boy, they didn't like that, did they?
But the answer is now what the Pakistani army seems to have done is to say what the Sri Lankans have done, we can do. And that is to say, take the conventional Pakistani army, go into the Swat Valley, and basically wipe out the Taliban, which are largely people now who have been recruited by the Indians and by the CIA in Afghanistan and then sent into Pakistan to overthrow the government. Those people seem to have been pretty much mowed down. So about 1,500 so-called Taliban, in other words, CIA secret army types, have been wiped out in the Swat Valley. Minimal losses for the Pakistani army. The goal being that if you can kick the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda out of your country, then Obama will no longer have the pretext to send these killer drones to destroy civilian targets.
Which they always target weddings and innocent groups to stir up and to get the Pashtuns and others to join with Taliban Al-Qaeda. Webster, it's so dastardly. On record, Al-Qaeda Taliban is CIA, Mossad, Shin Bet, MI6, on record. Right. And you try to tell the public that, they just can't get it. I mean, this is on record.
But now, the difference now, there is something new. That under Chinese auspices, and this is simply what's going on, like it or not, they've figured some of this stuff out. It's called the string of pearls, right? The Chinese say, well, we need to have Thailand, Burma, Myanmar, we need Bangladesh, we need Sri Lanka, we need the Seychelles, the Comores, we need to get over to Sudan and Zimbabwe. These are your Chinese allies, and this is what Brzezinski and Obama and the Clinton State Department are attacking. So there's got then to be a resistance, and the Chinese are basically showing them how to do it. With Chinese help, the Sri Lankans have wiped out these Tamil Tigers, and it may well be that with Chinese help, the Pakistanis are going to liberate themselves of the presence of these Taliban and Al-Qaeda.
All right, I got to shift gears.
It's a very promising sign in the world, I think. Highly interesting. People should know about it.
Webster, we got to have you up longer in the near future to really let you run all this because you're such an expert on it all, and we really appreciate your time. But going back here, but at the same time, China is Siamese twins here with the United States and the West, owning the majority of our debt. And Are they going to continue to hold the dollar? How do you see things unfolding versus